Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, The Juice, Dave Sadler. On this week's episode, we're going to go over some of the top headlines in the world of mixed martial arts, including the ongoing saga of one Mr. Anderson Silva, and, of course, another failed drug test and another big name as Hector Lombard has failed his most recent drug test, so we'll talk about that as well. World Series of Fighting and Bellator both have a fight this weekend, and so does the UFC, so we'll have 3 fights to preview as well. Once again, I'm your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is the Juice, Dave Sadler. And how's it going, Dave?
Good, sir. Ready to talk MMA? 9 days away, I think, from my travels to Detroit for Garth Brooks, so I'm getting excited again. I'll be heading your way.
Awesome. Maybe I'll see you.
I'll have to stop at your place of employment.
Yeah. Get some good food. So, all right. Well, let's get to Anderson Silva first, because obviously he is the one of the buzz fighters right now, and of course, following his fight at UFC 183, he failed the drug test, but before that, there were several other tests, as we all know now, the famous out-of-competition test. And according to the Nevada State Athletic Commission, Anderson Silva passed his out-of-competition test for HGH and performance-enhancing drugs. The test was released January 19th, and it was conducted by a WADA-accredited sports medicine research and testing lab in Salt Lake City, Utah. They didn't find any results, and he was also tested by blood. But the urine sample for performance enhancing, that passed again according to documentation obtained by MMA Junkie. That's where I'm getting this, and that was a test stemming from the UFC 183, which I think was his pre-fight test. But then it says the date of the SMRTL on HGH, February 2nd, which is one day before the report of the January 9th test results, which was made public, and that's when he, of course, was flagged for not one but 2 banned performance-enhancing substances. And I don't know. I don't know how much stock that really means. He passed one, he failed another. I mean, it doesn't really matter to me. It means that he passed the one and then thought he was clear. He maybe used another substance. I mean, it's not that unlikely. I don't think he has much of a claim for some type of non-suspension or non-getting his money back, which kind of stemming from this, obviously it looks as though obviously he's going to face a suspension, fine. The fight is now officially turned over to a no contest, especially with Diaz also failing his test. And obviously he's losing money. He's trying to fight it. Now, the thing I don't get, Dave, out of all this, I get the possible suspension. I get not losing money or not getting some money. But I don't get the fact that the Nevada Athletic Commission has pushed him out of coaching in The Ultimate Fighter. And now Little Nog will now be the coach against Shogun for The Ultimate Fighter Brazil, which will now film in Nevada, not in Brazil. And to me, they don't have any say in whether or not he should be able to coach. To me, that's a UFC decision. Yeah, sure, it's going to take place in Nevada, but he's not fighting. He's simply coaching. Regardless of him testing positive for any type of substance, I don't think he should have been pushed out from that show. And second of all, again, he is a first-time offender. It's not like he's a multiple offender. He's had a lot of serious problems with performance-enhancing drugs. Anderson Silva seems like a pretty nice and genuine guy. It seems like it was something that obviously was a mistake. I don't think it was something that he purposely tried to take and hoping he was beating the system or anything like that. So I think that's kind of a shame, because I think that was something he was actually looking forward to, and I don't think that's the business of the Nevada State Athletic Commission to push someone out of something they don't have a domain in there with the UFC's television program.
My thoughts on all these tests, a lot of that stuff that you said, Jim, is very confusing with, what's WADA, what do all these tests mean? Here's one thing that's not good. Anderson Silva's legacy is tarnished because all this stuff that you're talking about means that you're not talking about his performance in the cage and stuff that he's done. You know, in competition, out of competition, it doesn't matter how many you pass, it's how many you fail. And if he's passed every test that he's taken in his entire UFC career, nobody cares. It's the one that failed, and nobody cares if it's by this much, which if you're watching on the audio, if you're listening on the audio, you can't see. But if you fail it by this much, or by 1,000,000%, nobody cares. And with the Ultimate Fighter stuff, I think a lot of it, to be quite honest, has to do with the fact that he wants to be the Ultimate Fighter coach, and any MMA that takes place in Nevada, the Nevada State Athletic Commission has a run on, regardless if it's the Ultimate Fighter, and they have a right to do that, to tell him that he can't be a part of it.
I don't think they do.
I mean,
he's not fighting.
It says that in the article that I read, it says that any corner, the corner people, the judges, the ref, everybody has to be licensed at an event, which would, I mean, technically he's a corner. I mean,
he doesn't have to be in the corner. He can sit in the crowd. That's what I mean. I don't get it, Dave.
Well, I mean,
that's what I mean. He's not licensed to sit in the crowd.
I mean, I hear what you're saying. It just doesn't. I guess it's more.
Here's the thing. I'll put it this way. If the UFC was the one that came out and said, because of this, he's not going to coach, that's different than the Nevada State Athletic Commission saying he's not allowed to coach. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah, but they're also not gonna say that to one of arguably their biggest name. You know what I'm saying? Like, they're, as much as they want to, and to try to take a stand, the UFC is not gonna say that. They praise John Jones for going to rehab. They're not gonna kick their great, their big name out of the Ultimate Fighter.
I don't know. They kicked Wanderlei Silva out of the Ultimate Fighter.
Oh, well, in fairness to that decision, that was a little more egregious, where it was right there on the freaking screen for you to see.
I know, but you know what I mean, though. He was still a big star.
Yeah. You know what they should do, and we should copyright this, but so UFC 184 takes place February 28th, right? So March 6th, they should do a Fight Pass. They should do a Fight Pass exclusive, and we'll be like, here's the drug test for the main event, and then they're like, and everybody passed. They could do a big Fight Pass thing, just since everyone's so concerned about all the drug tests now. I mean, UFC could turn it into cash cow.
All right, well, we'll see what happens here with Anderson Silva. I mean, at the end of the day, it's just the Ultimate Fighter. Maybe I'm getting more worked up about it than I should, but I just don't think that it has anything to do with him fighting, so I don't think Nevada State Athletic Commission has a say. And like I said, he doesn't officially have to be in the corner. He can allow his coaches and trainers that he brings on the show to corner said fighters, and he can stand in the crowd watching from afar. So I don't know. Anyways, let's continue on here with failed drug test, as Hector Lombard has now been the most recent UFC fighter, or at least big UFC fighter, to have a positive test. This is following his win over Josh Berkman at UFC 182, and he tested positive for, all right, here's a name for you, deoxymethyltestosterone, which is a designer steroid. So that, to me, is not something that he accidentally took or was trying to overcome an injury or something like that. Now, he tested negative for any other type of performance-enhancing drugs, and as far as I know, I don't think he has failed any drug tests, at least with the UFC or with Bellator. So Obviously, he faces a possible suspension, fines, and it looks like his win will probably be overturned to a no contest against Josh Berkman. And kind of with that failed drug test, Dave, it looks as though Hector Lombard was set to face Rory McDonald at UFC 186, with the winner possibly getting a shot at the UFC welterweight title. But because of the failed drug test, Hector Lombard has been removed from that co-headlining slot, and it looks as though Rory McDonald will be facing somebody else. Hector Lombard probably will also have another fight, but with the failed drug test and depending on how long the suspension is with Hector Lombard, it will probably he will have to get maybe two fights to get that title shot. It's kind of like an added punishment in there, possibly. Again, it depends how long that suspension is. But as far as a new opponent for Rory, just to go on real quickly, I'm not really sure because Hendricks is tied up with Matt Brown coming up here in a few weeks. Obviously, Brandon Thatch is fighting this weekend. Stephen Thompson is injured. They're not gonna give him Robbie Lawler right away. It looks like he already fought Tyron Woodley and beat him. Woodley's now going to have to kind of overcome a foot injury, so I'm not sure if that's possibly. Obviously, Gastelum just lost, is forced to another weight class. You have Neil Magny has a fight coming up. Am I missing anybody in the top 10? I think he already fought Jake Ellenberger and lost, and Ellenberger's kind of on a losing streak right now.
Yep.
Carlos Condit's not yet cleared back from injury, so I'm not sure if they can keep him on 186 is basically what I'm trying to say. He can get a fight this year, but it doesn't look like it's going to be in Montreal. It looks like all the top guys are kind of a book there.
Yeah, that's I was just looking up some Hector Lombard stuff, but I don't know who he can fight. Maybe there's something they can do with him with the Ultimate Fighter somehow, if they brought back the smashes or something like that. But I'm sure we're going to talk about it later. But this Saturday, Bendo against Thatch. If one of those guys gets in and gets out relatively unscathed, that could be a fun matchup at 170 down the road. Maybe not at 186, but maybe at 186. Bendo wants to fight all the time now, apparently. But that could be fun, especially if he wants to keep fighting. But yeah, you're in a sticky situation. I mean, does Rory take a fight against like a top 13, 14 guy and risk his spot after he's, got it, and then, hey, we're going to pass you up, and then, do you risk it against a guy that you should beat? Like, that's a tricky situation.
And then, obviously, your thoughts on, the decision, obviously, to take Lombard out in his failed drug test.
It's weird, because if I'm looking at it right, that fight was January 3rd when Lombard fought. It's been over a month, and then wins 186. Isn't it pretty close? Or were they on 185 or 186?
Well, 184 is the end of February here, the 28th, and then I think March 14th is 185. That's the Pettis dos Anjos. So obviously 186 would be end of March, beginning of April.
Yeah, I thought it was in March. So my dismay was a little bit. I thought it was curious that he won a fight and then they booked him right away, and then it seemed really close to his fight. But since that didn't happen, I don't have that argument anymore. I guess I can kind of answer that with a question. Is the UFC going to have to change kind of the policy of, like, you have a big guy like Hector Lombard, right? Wins his fight, going to have Rory McDonald. That's a big fight. If you're getting ready to buy tickets for 186, you're excited for that. Do you almost have to wait for these drug tests to come back before you start booking these fights? Because you can't keep dangling Lombard McDonald in front of our face and then pulling it away. Gilbert Melendez and Eddie Alvarez. You can't dangle that in our face and then they come back post-fight a post-fight test. You can't keep doing that. You're gonna kind of piss off your crowd, don't you think?
I think so. I think that's a very real possibility that they're going to have to wait to get these test results in, or try a way to speed up the process to get the results. Because obviously this came out a few days ago, like you said, about a month after his fight. So that if that's the case, if that's how long it takes for these tests to process, that means the UFC would have to wait a month before they can even look at booking a guy's fight, which in some cases isn't that bad of a deal. If a guy faces a medical suspension for 90 days, what's 30 days in that thing matter?
I
But
agree.
if, like you said, you mentioned a case of, a guy knocking out another guy in 1 minute, well, obviously that guy is pretty fresh. He's probably good to go in a week or two. But if you then got to wait another week on top of that, or another 2-3 weeks on top of that, like you said, then you book a main event or a co-main event, a big fight like this, now you got to cancel it. And that becomes a problem. There's probably, I think more so than people failing drug test, is people either getting hurt or fights getting canceled. I think that upsets fans more than maybe just about anything else, is knowing you already threw the matchup out there and now it's gone.
Yeah, I know we keep going back to drugs and all that kind of stuff, but that's what's crazy. In theory, Brandon Thatch could walk out, drop Ben Henderson on Saturday, and then he could want to fight Rory McDonald and fill in on that card, right? In theory, his drug test from this fight would come back the same day as his fight against Rory McDonald. The way it's been going. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's how long it would take. Yeah, so I mean, if they could speed up the I guess the UFC wouldn't be speeding up the process. It's just, I don't know if they got to pay more to this whatever lab they use to get it through quicker, or what do they got to do? But if it could be sped up, I think they should wait. But if they got to keep on waiting a month after these fights, I know that may some fighters may not care, but we know our good friend like Darren Cruikshank, he likes to fight 5 times a year. And if he's kind of waiting that long after a fight, he might not get that opportunity. Or same thing with the Donald Cerrone, or back in the day, Josh Koscheck was fighting like 5-6 times a year. I mean, some of these guys that just want to have a quick turnaround, they're not going to be allowed that. And I think that's a shame, because how many times have we talked about fighter pay? And one of the reasons these guys want to fight more is because the more you fight, the more you get paid.
Yeah.
So I think it's something that they'll have to address here, Dave.
Yeah, definitely. I could go on that topic, but we've got many more to discuss.
All right. Well, speaking of, at least as of right now, guys doing the right thing, because of McDonald and Lombard getting dropped from 186, it will have a new, I think technically it's going to be a co-main event, I believe, and that's Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. He will once again defend his title. He will be now taking on Koji Horiguchi, and that will be in place of the McDonald and Lombard fight. And it will be a pretty good card for 186 that will join the main event, which will be TJ Dillashaw and Renan Barão 2. Also, Rampage Jackson will make his return to the organization against Fabio Maldonado. We have a matchup at middleweight between Bisping and Holloway, and I think the main card will either be rounded out by Thomas Almeida and Yves Joboy, or Pat Cote and Joe Riggs. I think you could probably make a case for either one rounding out the main card. Then you got a whole bunch of Canadian fighters, Jean Medeski and Abel Trujillo. Former tough winner Chad Laprise will take on Kevin Barana. A couple other fighters from that season of the Ultimate Fighter Canada Australia. And then, how about this, Dave? Finally, I believe this is her first fight since losing the Ultimate Fighter to Juliana Pena. Jessica Rakoczy will take on Valerie Leitrenault. And I believe that's going to be at strawweight, which actually was her natural weight class before trying out and making the Ultimate Fighter cast at 135. So nice to see Rakoczy finally getting a fight.
Oh, yeah. Did you mention the Alexis Davis-Sarah Kaufman fight?
The article I had did not have that, but yes, that will be on the card as well, and that could be on the main card or possibly the main event of the prelims.
Yeah, that's a very good fight.
That will be their third fight, correct, I believe?
Correct. That's the trilogy fight. That could, I know that's in April, but depending on 184's outcome, that could be the next challenger for whoever.
Very possibly.
Yeah. So that
But
I know 186 is April 25th. It's a long way away, but holy cow, the women's divisions are starting to pick up. In a 2-month period, you'll have Kat, Ronda, this Alexis Sarah fight, Rakoczy's back, Holly Holm's back. Them starting to pick up some steam.
now I just want to mention a minute. I know John Dodson's out. He's injured, and obviously he probably would have gotten his title shot or another title shot had he not got injured. And we saw the fight against Chris Carrizo. Now we're seeing Horiguchi getting a shot. I'm gonna be honest, Dave. I'm really high on Horiguchi. Don't get me wrong, but I think this is too quick for him. I think he's a young star. I would have liked to seen another fight before giving him Mighty Mouse Johnson, and mainly because, obviously he beat Luis Godinez, but I did not think that was his most impressive performance in the UFC. I thought that he kind of held back a little bit. He'd not seen the same guy that we saw in his previous two fights, kind of flying around, really throwing a lot of heavy shots. So I would have liked to seen maybe like a Joseph Benavidez, who's number 2, but almost a number 1. You know what I mean? That would have been a really good test to know if he's for real. Uncle Creepy, a Juicy Formiga, somebody other than, giving him the title shot right away. And I know they're looking for challengers for Mighty Mouse, and I guess they had to pick somebody with Dodson waiting out, but it would have been nice if they could have gave Horiguchi another fight, and then I know Mighty Mouse was talking about, hey, I'd have to get paid a good amount to move up and take Dillashaw, but I don't know, maybe just take a fight at 35 just against anybody. Just give him a fight at 35 against someone he can beat just to keep him, relevant or something.
Right. Give him Nick Diaz.
Yeah, Nick Diaz will fight Mighty Mouse.
Yeah. I'll smack that mouse around, homie.
You know what I mean? I don't know. I just think it's a little too quick.
No,
but
it's kind of like, it's weird because they have to give Mighty Mouse somebody. Horiguchi is a great talent at 125, and I think can give Mighty Mouse a run for his money down the road. I don't know if he can do it right now, but if you're Horiguchi, what are you going to do? Say no? No, you got to take that fight. But why do they do it like that with Horiguchi? But like somebody like Magny, who lost a couple fights, wins 6 in a row, and now he's fighting somebody we've still never heard of.
Right. Like
they're bringing him along, and gradually increasing, the level of competition. But Horiguchi goes from fighting, what's his last fight on Fight Pass to now he's the co-main event. That's crazy.
Well, actually, would have been cool. They should have done Horiguchi fight Benavidez, right? And then you give Mighty Mouse Brad Pickett, but at 135. So it's not a title fight, and he can kind of try to avenge that loss. And you set that as like a Fox Sports 1 main event.
It's a good idea.
Because it's got to be eaten at him that he lost to Brad Pickett, right?
Right.
So, and Brad Pickett would take that fight, and then, you could say, oh, well, but if he loses, it's a champion that lost and all that, he loses all his luster. And to me, no, he doesn't, because it's at 135 pounds.
Right.
He has been untouchable at 125, so I don't think it affects it all. And granted, and also it's a fighter that, people say, well, Mighty Mouse isn't that big a draw. So obviously you're not losing drawing power if he loses, because people are obviously not tuning into him anyway. So to me that's a win-win situation for the UFC, because then if he does lose, maybe then his next fight for a title fight, maybe that creates some intrigue, saying, well, he lost his last fight, a champion coming off a lot,
Yeah, it's ridiculous to me that it's ridiculous that he's arguably one of the top 3 or 4. You know what I mean? And he can't get a following on TV.
Yeah.
He's sponsored by Xbox.
Yeah.
Things just go on and on and on.
All right, well, let's get to our last headline here real quickly, and this is kind of stemming from, was it last week or 2 weeks ago we talked about this? No, it would have been I think it was 2 weeks ago. We talked about Miesha Tate not signing autographs through the mail anymore. When fans send her photos and other items into her mailbox, she signs them, sends them back, and obviously if they then sell those items, she doesn't get any money back. Well, MMA Junkie decided to kind of do an autograph expose, so to speak, and they kind of talked to some other people in the business, and one of the people they talked to is our good friend AJ Hiller from MMA Signatures USA.com. So I thought that was really cool that they got his side from actually a person that's his business, and they got a couple like other fans and stuff, and it's a really nice piece. I thought AJ did a great job, and kind of some of the stuff he told us, it kind of goes to some of the people that might not listen to our show, and he's talking about, different prices and autographs, and whether or not, the through the mail, can affect autographs and whatnot and stuff like that. And they talk about the sign-by posters where, the UFC makes about $1 million a year, if not more, depending on how many events they have off these events. And, it's just one of those things that is maybe kind of being brought to light because MMA is such a new sport and memorabilia is just starting to hit for a lot of these athletes. But, when you look at the grand scheme of sports memorabilia, this is nothing new, and this is the case in every single sport where a fighter's never going to get all the money off of the signing autographs, regardless of how they do it. And, there's always going to be some gotten for free or at a lesser price or a higher price, but they're never going to get every penny that their autograph is either perceived or actually worth. It's just kind of the reality of the business, and it's the fighter or the athlete's right to try to get as much money as possible, but at the end of the day, they're never going to see all of that money.
Yeah, the argument that I can see for MMA memorabilia, I can see this being it. If LeBron James signs a basketball, what's that basketball go for? 1,000? Maybe?
I would at least say a couple hundred. I mean,
so
I don't know how much his autograph is going for, but I would it's not going to go for $10, or I would say $100 would be a good deal.
Okay, so LeBron James signs a basketball for 100. He signs a basketball for a kid. Kid keeps it, sells it for, let's say, 500 down the road, right? Great. LeBron James also makes $40 billion for his contract. Plus, he's got Nike, he's got Adidas. He's got all this extra money that's coming in from all these other sources. The UFC, if they fight, they get paid. If they don't fight, they're not getting paid. So I can understand, them signing 50 cards for somebody who then turns around and sells them for $2 a piece on eBay. I can understand, a little bit of the resentment there because they're not making that huge money like a football or a basketball player is. But, there's ways to make money. Brian Ebersol will, if you see him at the store, he'll sign an autograph and be like, "Thanks a lot, bud. Thanks for being a fan. Blah blah blah." I could organize a signing and have him sign a bunch of stuff right here and mail it away. I mean, there's ways to make money, but you're trying to build a brand, trying to build up your name. Do you want to walk through the grocery store and walk up to Miesha Tate and she said, "Yeah, I won't sign this because you're gonna sell it"? I don't know. The autograph thing is crazy for MMA.
Well, I think she was more about through the mail more so than meeting a fan and signing it. But I think when you meet I think what she's kind of getting at is the autograph hounds, the people, coming up to you with 5 things to sign. You don't need 5 things of one person for your collection. That's when those people are selling it. But if someone comes up to you with one photo or one glove, is like, "Hey, can you sign this and take a picture?" Those are not the guys that are trying to sell it. And like I said, a fighter or athlete's not gonna make all the money, whether or not they need the money, like you said, LeBron James, or whether you're a UFC fighter and you could probably use the couple extra bucks. Either way, regardless of how you do it, people are gonna, if they want your autograph, they're gonna get it. That's kind of how I look at it.
Hey, Jim, 2 things real quick before we move off of headlines. One's memorabilia related and one is not. The first one, not we talked about it beforehand, but one of our good friends from the trading card and memorabilia group, Jason Gustafson, he mentioned via Facebook that he wanted to make sure we saw the Edgar Faber rumor and what we think about that.
Yeah, Team Alpha Male actually shared it on their Facebook page. It looks like it possibly would be scheduled for Manila, which is in the
Thrilla
Philippines.
in Manila?
Yeah, that Manila. That same Manila.
Will there be vanilla?
Possibly. Well, they're both white guys, so I guess yes. So
I could go on and on with these. I got tons.
So I guess the bout would be at 145 pounds, with Faber moving back up to his former weight class. I like it. Obviously, I think Faber's already lost to Barao twice. I know he talked about that he would probably fight TJ Dillashaw, but I'm thinking that they really wouldn't want to fight each other. So him moving back up to 45 for a fight, sure. And then for Frankie Edgar, he's in a situation where he should have a shot at the featherweight title, but he doesn't thanks to the hype train of Conor McGregor. So for him,
hype train?
He's got to. I guess he's got to take a fight because he's not a guy that I think that just wants to sit out and wait. So it's a fight against someone that's tough, but it's not necessarily another top guy in the featherweight division. It's kind of a stopgap fight. So I think it works out kind of perfectly for both guys where they're at in their respective careers, and I think it's one of those fights where you kind of looked at, as kind of a dream matchup, so to speak, because they've been two of the better lightweight fighters, over the last 5 years. So why not? And that's a cool main event to, I think, bring to the Philippines, two big names that might help push some tickets.
And last thing, it's a follow-up. How about that? Beyond the Cage, doing follow-ups to stories they've already reported. We did have Nick from A&N Sports Cards on, and we talked about there was quite the big issue about these sketch cards. The one-of-one cards where there's different artists around. Utterstum is the last name that I remember. There's James Smith is on there. There's a couple pretty talented artists that sketch these one-of-one cards. And the big thing was that the new release of cards, Bloodlines, was supposed to have sketch cards, but they'd opened something like 70 cases and no sketch cards had been pulled. Well, that stopped last night when our friend Jason Gustafson, he pulled the Donald Cerrone card, the sketch card, last night. So finally one has been surfaced. So now the rumor on the card Underground, I used air quotes, Jim, Underground, is that now everybody's back and they want to buy into that Bloodlines product for a chance to get a sketch card, of their favorite fighters. So, we talked about it. There was people who wanted to write letters, and Nick wasn't sure what was going to go on, but looks like they finally surfaced.
So that either means the boxes they were in finally got to, or they were actually finally put in said boxes that were set out. However you want to look at it, I'm not really sure.
Well, yeah. So thank you, Dave and Beyond the Cage, for following up on that investigative story.
All right, before we get to the UFC fight here on Valentine's Day, there's two other organizations that are having fight. On Thursday night, World Series of Fighting 18 will take place, and that's going to be in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. The main event will be for the World Series of Fighting Bantamweight title, as their 135 champ, Marlon Moraes, will take on undefeated Canadian prospect Josh Hill. Now, while Josh Hill is undefeated, obviously he hasn't fought anybody the caliber of a Marlon Moraes. Now, so far Marlon has pretty much beat everybody and beat everybody pretty soundly. Looking at Mr. Hill, of his 10 wins, he has 6 decisions. I would say, that's a good way to try to beat Moraes, going all 25 minutes, but honestly, he's gone 25 minutes several times, really hasn't slowed down too much, so I'm not sure what Josh Hill's game plan will be. I don't think trying to go 25 minutes is the should be a plan. You may want to try to get out quickly, not suffer in there and have your leg get battled and bruised. Maybe try to take him down, but he has shown great takedown defense. Moraes, I mean, I don't know. I want to kind of see an upset, but at the same time, it just doesn't seem like it's going to be Josh Hill. And again, Marlon Moraes is a guy I think just biding his time and waiting to get to the UFC or Bellator or somewhere bigger where he can actually get a challenge.
Yeah, he wants a bigger challenge clearly, and I don't anticipate it being this weekend.
And I would say, well, you have a lot to look forward to besides that fight, but to be honest, you don't. Besides seeing the great Marlon Moraes, the next biggest name on the card is Cody McKenzie, who has come out of retirement, and he's going to take on a fighter who's 5-1 by the name of Andrew McCain. So, yeah, not a lot to look forward to here for yeah. So, I guess tune to the main event to see if something shocking will happen. But other than that, you can pass on Thursday night and Mr. Moraes for World Series of Fighting. On Friday night, from the Save Mart Center in Fresno, California, Bellator 133 main event, Melvin Manhoef against Alexander Shlemenko, and also a pretty solid co-main event with Pat Curran taking on Daniel Weichel. Now, the only thing weird about this is I believe Daniel Weichel won a featherweight tournament, but I guess with the new regime in Bellator and stuff, I guess all these guys that won some recent tournaments, they're kind of getting left out the cold here, and it's like their accomplishment didn't even matter. So Weichel, instead of getting his immediate title shot, he now has to take on Pat Curran to get that title shot, which I think is rather unfortunate. For Curran, it's good because obviously he's trying to get back to his featherweight championship, but I think that's kind of a raw deal there for Daniel Weichel.
Yeah, raw deal, new regime, like you said. To be completely honest, the first two fights are good. Obviously I'll be DVRing them. It's the day before Valentine's Day, and I work, so I won't be. I'm off that day. I'll be hanging with the wife, doing the Valentine's thing, so I'll DVR them. But which one am I most excited for? Julia Budd against Gabriella Holloway. Bellator bringing back 145 pounds in the women's division. What do you think about that?
That's good because obviously, they're trying to get Cyborg. There's talks of them. We're trying to get Corrado. So we'll see. I think it's again, it's a division the UFC doesn't have, so it makes sense.
Right.
To add that division, obviously they already have Marlis Kunin on the roster, so I think they're trying to get a couple of fights, with some of these ladies and then determine a champion. But I think it's good again that they're promoting female MMA. We kind of didn't like the decision to get rid of it, but it looks like Scott Coker, they're going to actually be promoted the right way. So I think that's a good move for Bellator moving forward. Absolutely. All right, well, talked about Bellator. We talked about World Series of Fighting, so I guess it's time to talk about the UFC. 6 fights on the main card for UFC Fight Night Broomfield, which will be on Valentine's Day, Saturday, February 14th on Fox Sports 1. The first fight of the evening will be in the flyweight division as Kalaitis will take on Borg. Looking at Mr. Kalaitis, he is 1-0 in the UFC. His last fight was a win over Patrick Houlihan at the Fight Night in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and 3 of his 8 career victories are by submission. Looking at Mr. Ray Borg, he is 1-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a win over Shane Howell at the Fight Night in Albuquerque last year, and 5 of his 7 career victories are by submission. Now, I don't know a lot about these two gentlemen. I believe I had seen Ray Borg's win and finish before, but I don't remember seeing Chris Kalaitis fight before against O'Houlihan. Obviously, both of them pretty submission savvy. I would venture to guess that's probably where guys are both comfortable grappling, but typically when you get guys with kind of that grappling background, it ends up being a stand-up war. Now, obviously, it's the flyweight division, so it should be fast. I think it should be fun, and I think it should be pretty entertaining. And I'd like to say, because it's a flyweight fight, obviously we always say a flyweight fight equals a pretty good card when one is added, but with 2 relatively unknown names, I think that's a very surprising fight to kick off the card, though. I will say that.
Yeah, especially when you have McCoskey and Elliott kicking off the prelim card on Fox Sports 1 earlier. It seems like you should flip-flop those two.
Right, and you have a guy like Nick Lentz, who's a top 10 featherweight, also on the undercard.
Correct. Yeah. And of course, Nick Lentz is fighting the shadow that is Brian Ebersol.
Better known as Levon Makashvili.
Yeah, that's funny if you go to UFC.com. But no. First of all, I thought that this Ray Borg was fighting Chris. What's the guy from the Red Hot Chili Peppers? Anthony Kiedis.
Yes,
that's what I thought it said. I thought they moved him from the front row to the cage.
You know, if Anthony Kiedis maybe 15 years ago, I would say probably give him a run for his money.
Yeah. No, you know, it's two relatively unknowns. This is the problem when you have this division. What they should have been doing is putting all these 125-pound fights on the main cards, getting people to view these guys that we don't know. I mean, it's like 500 guys on the roster. We can't know each and every one of them. You know, it's hard to remember each and every fight, and you know, hopefully one of them does something impressive to where we think that they can move forward, especially in that division. What did we say? Horiguchi was ranked, and now he's getting a title shot.
Horiguchi was ranked 7, and I believe he only has 3 fights in the UFC.
Yeah, so
if I'm not mistaken.
Couple 2-3 wins, you're right there. So be interesting to see. You know, this may seem like just 2 flyweights fighting each other, but there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff on the line, even though nobody's ranked.
The next fight of the evening is in the lightweight division, as Lee will take on Prazeres. Looking at Kevin Lee, he is 2-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a victory at UFC 178 over John Tuck, and 5 of his 9 career victories are by decision. Looking at Michael Prazeres, he is 2-1 in the UFC as well. His last fight was a victory over Mairbek Tazimov at the Fight Night Hendo Shogun 2, and 8 of his 18 career victories are by submission. Now, despite the decision pedigree there for Kevin Lee, this man trains right here in Detroit under his father, who was also in the UFC, James Lee, at the MASH gym over in off of Farmington Road here. So I actually passed it the other day. Anyways, very accomplished kickboxer. That's actually his strength. Obviously has some power, but typically can go deep in fights and kind of wear you down that way, and that's where I expect Kevin Lee to attack. For Mr. Prazeres, I don't remember his win over Mr. Tazimov, but obviously with 8-18 wins by submission, that looks to be an area he looks to go to, so it should be a good grappling versus striking matchup. If Kevin Lee can keep this standing, I have full confidence he can win this fight. But if he gets tied up against the cage, kind of grappling a little bit, if he gets put on his back, that's not where he's the best, and I think can very well lose this fight. These are 2 up-and-comers here in the lightweight division, and whoever can impose their will and impose their game plan will come out on top of this one.
Yeah, you know, Jim, if you look at UFC.com, you know, I'm looking at the photos and their percentages of wins and all that kind of stuff. It looks to me like Prazeres, however you want to pronounce it, Lee's opponent, it looks like he's leaning a little bit closer to the camera to try to make himself look huge at 155 pounds.
Could be. I mean, Lee's a solid 55er.
Oh yeah. But no, I don't remember much about the tractor. That's Prazeres there. But you know, Kevin Lee is a very formidable opponent, and Prazeres must be doing something right. He's 18-1, so yeah, very good fight at 155 pounds. That's a tough division, man. So you're gonna have to make some waves and make them quick if you want to start to make a run. So 2 very interesting fights to kick off the card.
Yeah, just to throw it out there for people, Kevin Lee's first ever UFC fight was against Ally Aquinta, and guess what? He did not get knocked out by Ally Aquinta, unlike Ross Pearson and Joe Lazone. So I think that says something about how tough this kid is.
Oh yeah,
All right, let's get to the next fight of the evening in the middleweight division, as Patrick Walsh will take on Dan Kelly. Looking at Walsh, 1-0 in the UFC. His only UFC victory was over his fellow castmate on The Ultimate Fighter Season 19 and Dan Spawn at the finale, and 2 of his 5 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Kelly, 1-0 in the UFC. His first fight in the UFC was a victory over Luke Zackridge at the UFC Fight Night Sydney, and 5 of his 8 career victories are by submission. Now, I remember because we got to talk to Luke Zackridge before his fight against Dan Kelly. Dan Kelly, I believe, did judo in the Olympics for Australia, if I'm not mistaken. So this guy, incredible grappling background, and obviously, as you saw against Luke Zackridge, also has a lot of submission ability as well, and he's able to transition very quickly. Now, for Patrick Walsh, from what I remember when he was on The Ultimate Fighter, pretty solid boxer, pretty good at stand-up, but not the greatest grappler. So I think for Walsh, you're going to have to try to really be a counter fighter and move, because if you allow Kelly to get inside in the clinch, he will be able to take you down and probably can submit you. That's kind of what I'm looking. I'm either thinking a knockout by Walsh or a submission by Kelly. And it could go the distance, but I really think we're going to see a finish in this fight. And I think one of these guys, I don't know if they're going to amount to that much in the UFC. But from what I've seen of both guys, I kind of liked them watching it on The Ultimate Fighter and stuff, and I think it should be a pretty solid fight here at middleweight.
Yeah, I did some research while you were talking. Dan Kelly, highest finish in 4 Olympic Games in judo, was 7th in 2004. Only competitor to make 4 Australian Olympic teams in judo.
That's something, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
7th in the world
is tough enough. To make it 4 times?
Yeah.
That's something.
Yeah, I wonder what who was making fun of Court? Oh, Jones is always like, how was 4th place in the Olympics? How about going to the Olympics 4 times? How about that?
Yeah.
Jerk.
That's pretty good. All right, well, you were talking about this guy earlier, Dave, and here's his fight here is Neil Magny will take on Kiichi Kunimoto in the welterweight division. Looking at Neil Magny, 6-2 in the UFC, overall riding a 5-fight winning streak. His last fight was a win over William Marcuscio at UFC 179, and 7 of his 13 career victories are by decision. Looking at Kunimoto, 3-0 in the UFC, and overall riding a 7-fight winning streak. His last fight was a win over Richie Walsh at the UFN Japan in September last year, and 9 of his 18 career victories are by submission. Now, in that fight against Richard Walsh, for those of you who did see it, I was not very impressed with Kunimoto. In fact, I thought he lost that fight and got outclassed by Richie Walsh. Somehow the judges there, I guess, gave the home countryman there the victory. But I'm kind of looking at if Richie Walsh, who's not a small welterweight, but obviously not as big as Neil Magny, if he could go in there and really out-grapple and dish a lot of damage out against Kunimoto, I have no reason to believe that Neil Magny can't do the same thing. I think if it goes past the first round, Kunimoto's lost. If he doesn't get out of this quickly, I don't see how he beats Neil Magny in a 15-minute fight. I just don't. Neil Magny is a guy that is very accustomed to going 15 minutes. That's kind of his style. He likes to grind on you, whether it's in the clinch, whether it's moving in and out with his footwork and boxing. I mean, he has a couple different ways he can kind of wear you down. But if it goes to that third round, more times than not, he's coming out the winner.
Yeah, Neil Magny can go for days. He's got that gas tank, and he trains at altitude, which is gonna.
He's actually training right next door because he trains with Team Grunge, which is I want to say Aurora, Colorado, which is only a few miles from Broomfield. They're both suburbs of Denver, so he's pretty much fighting at home. Yeah,
and I mean, that's got to say a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like your own bed, all that kind of stuff. It's got to play a lot. His opponent's obviously going to fly in from wherever, which gives him a distinct advantage in my mind. But Neil's got that. He's got a 5-inch reach advantage at 170 pounds. That's a pretty big reach advantage that not a lot of guys have, and it's very under. I think it's very underappreciated by the media and by fans about just like how big of an advantage that is for Neil Magny. You know, he's still growing into his body, growing as a fighter, and all that, and he's got a lot of positives in his direction leading into every fight. Every fight that he had in this last calendar year, where he won like 6, I mean, he had distinct advantages over everybody, and I still think that anybody they match him up with at 170 pounds, it's a tricky matchup for whoever he fights.
The co-main event of the evening is in the featherweight division, as Max Holloway will take on Cole Miller. Looking at Miller, longtime UFC veteran, 10-6 overall record. His last fight was a win over Sam Sicilia, and that was about a year ago, Dave, at the fight night with Luke Rockhold and Costa Filippo. So it's been a while since Cole Miller has been in action, and 15 of his 21 career victories are by submission. Looking at Max Holloway, 7-3 so far in the UFC, riding a 4-fight winning streak. His last fight was a victory over Akira Corsani at the fight night in Sweden, and 5 of his 11 career victories are by knockout. I think this one's plain and simple. If it stays standing, it's Max Holloway. Cole Miller's, he's gotten better in his stand-up since his time on The Ultimate Fighter Season 5, which was 8 years ago. But it's Max Holloway has the better stand-up and has that knockout power and that finishing ability. He has really started to get on a roll here as of late, especially with the finishes. But if it goes to the ground, Cole Miller is still a very, very, very good submission expert, and I believe now does have his black belt there down in American Top Team. So he's a guy Mr. Young Max Holloway does not want to mess with on the ground. And obviously that's going to be Cole Miller's game plan, is going to try to turn this into a grappling match. And if he can, I have no doubt he can submit Max Holloway. But if it stays standing, Max has a very real chance to knock out Cole Miller. So I think we have a really nice grappler versus striker matchup, and I think either way we can see an exciting finish.
Yeah, this is a good fight. Just because Max Holloway, he got beat by Connor. How long ago was that?
That was his last loss. That would have been 2013. Yeah, because I think he went 4-0 this year.
Yeah, that's going to keep getting shown every time they show Connor, him getting beat. Max Holloway's he's still very young in the sport, and all he's done is grown in the UFC. He's 23 years old. This guy's got still a lot to prove, and he's just coming in, starting to come into his own. And, do not sleep on Max Holloway. I think a lot of people do, just because of previous losses and whatnot, but this guy's on a roll. He's 23 and he's got more fights than, he's 23 and he has more UFC fights than Daniel Cormier has MMA fights. And Daniel Cormier fought for the belt at light heavyweight.
Right, and I mentioned, Cole Miller's been in the UFC, I believe, since 2007. He's only 10-6. That's 16 fights. Max Holloway already has 10 fights in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
And has only been in for, I think, 3 years.
Yep.
So, yeah, he's getting up there. But this is a nice test for him, and I think this is a good matchup, coming off the win against Corsani. A guy that's not another striker. A guy that will try to test him in other areas of his game. All right, well, let's get to the main event, the new main event of the fight night in Broomfield, and that is now former UFC 155-pound champion Ben Henderson. He will move up to 170 to face one of the up-and-comers in the division in Brandon Thatch. Looking at Ben Henderson, he is 9-3 in the UFC. He has lost 3 out of his last 4 fights, however, and that last fight was a loss to John Cerrone just a couple weeks ago at the fight night in Boston, and 10 of his 21 career victories are by decision. Looking at Brandon Thatch, just 2-0 so far in the UFC. He's overall riding a 10-fight winning streak. His last fight was a victory over Paulo Thiago at the fight night Vitor versus Hendo. That was that was quite a while ago, and 8 of his 11 career victories are by knockout. And Dave, that's really the thing that scares me about Thatch in this is not so much, him facing a great wrestler or anything. His last fight was November 9th, 2013.
Right.
And in that fight, he fought for 2 minutes.
So
it's been over a year, and he's overcoming injury, and he's fighting the best fighter he's ever fought. Granted, that fighter's moving up a weight class, but that still doesn't mean Ben Henderson. I mean, I would say just about all of his skills transfer to the 170 division. I mean, he's already had great conditioning at 155. That's not going to be affected in this fight, up 15 pounds. If anything, that should help him more because he doesn't have to worry about trying to pace himself as more. He doesn't have to worry about as much of a weight cut. And if anything, that may make him a more dangerous fighter. Now, obviously, the negatives of moving up a weight class is the strength. Now, while Brandon Thatch is not necessarily a Hector Lombard or a Tyrone Woodley, this guy is 6'2". He's a big dude. Ben Henderson's 5'9". We talk about reach. You add height with that. That could very well play a factor in this fight if Ben Henderson wants to strike with Mr. Brandon Thatch, which not too many gentlemen have come out unscathed. As I mentioned, 8 of his 11 career victories are by knockout. So if you're Ben Henderson, you got to go to your wrestling roots. You got to be in this guy's face, and you got to try to push him because not only is this his first fight coming off of injury, like I said, about 13 months, Brandon Thatch is a guy that doesn't stay in the cage very long. So the longer you can make this fight, that plays into the advantage of Ben Henderson. So, and I know he trains a lot in Arizona. That's not quite the altitude that there is in Denver, but it's pretty darn close. So I don't see that affecting him. For Brandon Thatch, I'm not exactly sure where he trains, so I'm not sure if the altitude will be a problem.
He trains with Kent he
trains in Denver? Okay, yeah. Well then I guess he'll be fine on that. But the going, second, even third round is something that he doesn't do very often, and coming off of injury, it will be interesting to see. But I'm looking forward to this. This is a fight where I don't know if Ben Henderson's going to stay at 170. I think it's an opportunity that he saw, and he took it. And for Brandon Thatch, it's a great opportunity to fight it was already a great fight with him taking on Stephen Thompson, but I think it's even a bitter deal now if he can beat a guy the caliber of Ben Henderson, because I think that shoots him from being outside of the top 15 just because of injury and inactivity, and all of a sudden, he's in the top 15, and like you said, you threw out kind of Rory McDonald, but there's some other big name, all of a sudden he's right in the thick of things at 170 by beating Ben Henderson.
That means we get to play that song twice in like 3 weeks.
Oh, that's a good.
It's a great thing. No, I think everything that you said rings true, Jim. Thatch is dangerous, but it's been such a long time. We don't exactly know. If there's ring rust, I think Ben Henderson is a terrible opponent to shake your ring rust off against. It's going to be it has the ability to be a real fun fight, but like you said, I think that the skills that Ben Henderson have translate at the next weight class, and the big time fights that he's been in, this isn't going to be very much different for him.
All right, with that said, Dave, let's get to picks.
Let's do it.
First fight of the evening in the flyweight division, Borg against Kalidas. Ray Borg's nickname is the Terminator, even though it should be Ray Cyborg, but nevertheless, go with Ray Borg.
You're going with Borg?
Yes.
I'm going to go with Borg, too.
All right, and just so you know, this is Cyborg from DC Comics.
I didn't see it. I was hitting play.
Cyborg?
I see it.
Okay, that should be his nickname. Duh, everyone knows this. Anyways, all right, let's move on. Kevin Lee against Prazeres in the lightweight division. He's called the Motown Fetom, right? I'm wearing my Detroit Tigers hat. No brainer, I'm going Kevin Lee.
I'm going to Detroit next week, so I'll take the Motown throwdown guy.
All right, at middleweight, Walsh against Kelly. Give me the 4-time Australian Olympian, Daniel Kelly, in this one.
I'll take Kelly as well, because he's not 1, not 2, not 3, 4-time Olympian.
Man, he's one short of Booker T's WCW championship. All right, welterweight division, Neil Magny against Kichi Kunimoto. Well, he's not my hometown guy. He's Dave's hometown guy, but I'll go with him in this one, and I'll take Mr. Magny to continue on his winning streak.
I'm congratulating your pick, and I second that. I think your pick is money.
All right, Cole Miller against Max Holloway, featherweight division co-main event of the evening. I have a feeling this could be fight of the night on this card, or performance of the, whatever they're calling it now. I think this could be the best fight of the evening. But give me the man from Hawaii in Max Holloway.
Jim, this is going to be the greatest transition you've ever heard, ever. So my pick for this fight is Blessed. Max Blessed Holloway.
There he is. All right.
And
so that's already your pick for the main event, right? We're not.
But see how I did the Blessed and then I turned it into Our God? See that?
Right. That's pretty good. All right. So we know Dave's pick.
We don't need a producer. We got me and YouTube.
He's going with the smooth one, Ben Henderson against Brandon Thatch here in the main event, and I will concur. I will also go Ben Henderson. I really like Brandon Thatch. I think he has a bright future in the UFC welterweight division. It's just unfortunate. I think had he had the fight with Stephen Thompson, then Ben Henderson, maybe a little different story. But coming off injury and all that, I think this is a tough fight for him. So give me Ben Henderson in the main event. Any final thoughts to add before we end the show here, Dave?
Good weekend for good weekend for fights. If you got a DVR, if you're free, check out all the fights we talked about, and getting close to the end of the reign of Ronda Rousey, so I'm getting excited.
All right. Of course, we got to think.
What did you laugh at? Why did you laugh?
No, it's just, I don't know. It's just funny that you brought that up. I'm not even thinking about that right now. That's all.
I'm 100% ingrained in that fight.
I got to thank our friends at MMAinsider.net, MMAforlife.ca. Of course, we already talked about them, but AJ Hiller at MMASignaturesUSA.com. Which one's that?
Oh, I'm showing our sponsors certificate of authenticity.
What is the for it though? That's what I meant.
Little Eddie Wineland action.
Nice. All right. Of course, Bluegrass MMA covering the local scene here in the Midwest. BluegrassMMA.com and TopRatedMMA.com. Check out their gear and buy some. And of course, we just said AJ Hiller MMA Signatures, and our presenting sponsor, of course, Fight Chicks Clothing and Apparel. He is the Juice, Dave Sadler. You can follow him on Twitter at VigilanteJuice. I'm your host, Jim Graham. You can follow me on Twitter at Jim Graham. For Dave Sadler, I am Jim Graham. Thanks again for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks.